Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Rebecca Chop, Chancellor of the University of Denver.
Good evening. I'm so glad to welcome everyone to this Voices of Experience. DU's mission at its heart is to serve the public good, to elevate our students, our alumni, leaders in the community to gather to talk about new ways of serving the public good, and also to profile leadership. What does it mean to be a leader in the 21st century? Tonight, we're going to be very, very fortunate with several amazing leaders. We're going to welcome Matt Bond, Chairman of the Content Distribution of NBC Universal, who received his BSBA in Finance and Marketing in 1983. Some of his friends are here tonight, so if you'd like to talk to them about what he was like as a student, I'm sure they'll tell you great stories, right? Jana Hethern, President and CEO of the Cable Center, received her MBA in 1980, a true neighbor and partner to DU. And Matt Fries, CEO and Vice Chairman of Liberty Global. Many of you know Mike. He is a leader in this Denver community. He runs and is involved in a lot, but one of my favorite projects that he chairs is the Biennials of America, which is really thinking about the Western Hemisphere, a project that brings North and South together in ideas, culture, and commerce. So we have with us 3 leaders tonight who think outside the box, who serve their communities, and who care very much about leadership in the 21st century. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Dean Brent Crite. Dean Crite came to us about 4 years ago. In fact, he started at DU 1 month before I did, so he's my senior colleague as Dean of the Business School. And in his brief 3.5 years, he's really revolutionized how we think about business education, especially the MBA. Starting a PhD program, starting an MS in global leadership. Brent is a devoted internationalist and has traveled and worked in many, many countries. And he is a dean of one of the top business schools. He's bringing these together so we can make sure that leaders in business and commerce, in real estate, in marketing, in accounting, in restaurant and hotels, understand not only what it is to be a leader in this city, in this state, in this country, but around the world. So please help me welcome Brent Crite.
Thank you, Rebecca. Good evening. It is my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's Voices of Experience. As Rebecca mentioned, this is the signature speaker series for the Daniels College of Business, where we bring CEOs and other significant leaders to the community to share lessons that they've learned over the course of their leadership careers. As you know, this series is free and open to the community, and we could not do this without the support of our generous partners. I want to thank U.S. Bank for their sustained and committed support of this program. They are an invaluable partner to Voices of Experience and to Daniels, and we're grateful for their partnership. We also want to thank Newmont Mining for their sustained support and engagement in this activity. As I had a chance to mention to a few colleagues a little while ago, it's really fortuitous and fitting that we can hold this evening's event in the Cable Center, given that we're hearing from 2 of the most significant influencers in cable and media who will discuss the industry's current landscape, challenges, disruptions, and opportunities. DU and the Cable Center have a rich and enduring history. Former DU Chancellor Dan Ritchie and the Daniels namesake and benefactor and cable pioneer Bill Daniels lobbied hard for the Cable Center to be relocated from its original home at Penn State University to the University of Denver campus in 1995. Since then, DU and the Cable Center have collaborated on many projects. Just a couple of examples. Numerous joint speaker events and the Cable Mavericks program, which brings cable industry leaders into DU classrooms across our campus. The DU Cable Center, the Cable Center created the James M. Cox Endowed Chair for Customer Experience, a position held by Dr. Charles Patty, former Daniels Dean, since its inception. Dr. Patty is also a senior fellow for the Cable Center, along with a Daniels faculty member and my good friend, Ron Rizzuto. We are incredibly fortunate to have secured such outstanding speakers and partners for this evening's VOE. This is consistent with the past quality of our speakers, and we are so grateful that you came here to share this evening's activities with us. Mike Fries is the CEO and Vice Chairman of Liberty Global, the largest international and TV broadband company in the world, with operations in 12 European countries and 52 million broadband, video, voice, and mobile subscribers. Liberty Global is recognized as a global leader in entertainment, media, and communications, spearheading gigabit broadband speeds, actively integrating traditional video and OTT platforms, and converging fixed and wireless services with quad play bundles. Mike is also the executive chairman of Liberty Latin America, a leading broadband and mobile operator in Chile, Puerto Rico, and the Caribbean. LLA serves 9 million broadband, video, voice, and mobile subscribers across 20 consumer and over 30 B2B markets. Mike serves as a trustee of Cable Labs, the Cable Center, and the Paley Center for Media, among other board appointments. Joining Mike is Daniels alum Matt Bond, chairman of content distribution for NBC Universal, where his responsibilities include, among other things, the distribution of NBC Universal's linear broadcast and cable networks, NBC-owned stations, TV everywhere, and video on-demand projects. Matt and his team have secured extensive affiliation agreements with NBC Universal's entire network portfolio, including NBC, Telemundo, USA, Sci-Fi, Bravo, E, Oxygen, MSNBC, CNBC, and NBCSN. Matt also spearheads distribution of NBC's Universal presentation of the Olympic Games, working with hundreds of distributors to make the games available to millions of fans on linear networks and emerging digital platforms. Before joining NBC Universal, Matt was the executive vice president for content acquisition for Comcast Cable, where he oversaw strategic direction of the company's content portfolio. I'm thrilled to announce that moderating tonight's discussion is Jana Henthorn, president and CEO of the Cable Center, who brings more than 30 years of experience from all corners of the industry to this position. Prior to joining the Cable Center in 2016, Jana managed the network sales team for 16 states and 2 regional offices as vice president of affiliate sales for A&E television networks. She also served as vice president of operations and services fulfillment for Jones Intercable, one of the top 10 cable distributors, until its acquisition by Comcast in 1999. While at Jones, she managed local cable operations in Wisconsin and Florida. A champion of women in the cable industry, Jana served on the National Board of Executive Committee for Women in Cable and Telecommunications from 1995 until 2000, and she is a charter member of Betsy Magnus Leadership Institute. So you're in for a treat this evening, and I'm thrilled that you could join us. It is now my pleasure to introduce our distinguished guests and moderator, Mike Fries, Matt Bond, and Jana Henthorn.
All right. Well, thank you, Brent, for that gracious introduction tonight, and welcome all of you to the Cable Center. I know most of you probably know this as an event center, but we also do a lot of global programs where we match up people and programs to achieve innovation in the industry. So check out our website. When the three of us started our careers in the cable industry, we were the scrappy upstarts, and Denver was really probably the center of the cable universe, and we're still pretty scrappy.
Yeah.
But there are
A little worse for wear.
indeed, and we really have a lot of new players on the global front. And as I was trying to think about how to explain this to get us started, I thought Netflix is a wonderful example of some of the new players. And so if you think about Netflix, and I'm not talking about when you used to mail in the DVDs, but Netflix rides on our network, on the cable industry's network, and we call that OTT, or over the top, so it's riding on the network. And also, if you think about it, there wouldn't be a Facebook, Amazon, Apple TV, Google without the cable center, or without the cable industry's infrastructure. So that's something we can talk about.
They don't like to admit that, but that is true.
Yeah. And so not only is Netflix, though, over the top, they're also a content provider. And I can take my Comcast remote and say Netflix into the voice activation. Isn't that the best? And say Netflix into it, and they're on my screen. So, plus, Matt, they're doing original programming now. So a lot of different and new and innovative things going on, a lot of new players. So my question, guys, friends, enemies, frenemies, what's your feeling on some of
On
these
over the
other
top?
players? Yeah, on the new entrants.
Well, I mean, I'll start. I think they are both for us. In many ways, and there's plenty of them. It's not just Netflix. It's YouTube and Amazon and anybody who's marketing their products across our network or across the internet direct to consumers. So today you can pretty much get almost anything directly to your iPad or your smartphone or your television without having to get a cable subscription. And so what we've done, and certainly what Comcast has done, is started to partner with these companies and incorporate that content into the cable experience. So you don't have to click 3 or 4 or 5 buttons, pick up another remote. You can actually get to Netflix straight away. So in some respects, they're friends. They're becoming great content partners of ours. I would also say that Netflix in particular taught us a very big lesson in the cable industry. How many of you are Comcast customers out there? And how many of you have the X1, the new box? And would you give it up and go back to the old box? No. I'm promoting your company here, but I'm making a point because we're doing the same thing in Europe, which is, it forced us to innovate. And that's good. I mean, when people could get content on every device at any point in time, on demand, it was clear to us we needed to innovate rapidly. And X1 is an example of what Comcast has done. We've done something on the very same software stack in Europe. We call it Horizon. And that product is making our business very sticky and making customers very happy. So on a lot of levels, they've been friends and teachers, in a sense. Clearly, there are some things they're doing that we're not in love with. I think Amazon, for example, has a different business ambition than perhaps Netflix. I'm reading a book right now called Titan about Rockefeller. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of similarities, in a sense of how they're looking at the end-to-end business environment they operate in and trying to continually push forward into new markets. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying it presents a different kind of competitive balance for us. So I'd say friend and foe. And the last point I'd make is the more time you spend on the internet, the better for us. Because broadband is really our business product today. In our case, unlike, say, 30 years ago when we started this company and video was all of our revenue, today, video is only a third of our revenue. The rest is broadband, mobile, B2B, enterprise services, voice services. So increasingly that, the business has diversified quite a bit, and broadband is the most important piece. There is no product I'm aware of where demand is growing 30 to 40 to 50% a year every year. It's not cars. You are consuming more broadband every year because you're watching more video, you're downloading richer websites, you're doing more online, whether it's your mobile phone or your fixed line service, and that's our core business. So it's in that respect, it's really a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I would echo that. I think there are parts of what Netflix is doing that is great for NBC and Comcast, and other parts that are competitive. If you think of the value chain of television production, you have this incredible collection of creative talent out there, huge cloud of content creators, and that content creation gets funneled into studios. Those studios then sell content to networks. Networks are then distributed by distributors, by cable distributors, satellite distributors, and whatnot. And so Netflix is a big buyer of content from the studio side of the business, and NBC owns a studio, very prolific studio. So that part has been terrific. Netflix, of course, is also a competitor to our networks, and is also to some degree a competitor to the cable distribution. However, even that has been changing. I think what Mike was saying is right. I think Netflix has really shown that there is tremendous untapped consumer value and potential in video on demand and back-season content rights. And I expect networks are going to start to innovate in that way and try to provide a more fully featured product for customers, really to capture that customer interest and demand. And then, of course, on the distribution side in the US here, it's really no different. Broadband is now the vast majority of the cash flow for the cable company, and Netflix is a huge reason for people to get broadband. And it is amazing. For the last 10 years, there have always been these voices that say, oh, well, I think it's peaked. Usage is peaked. Internet usage is peaked. People are doing everything they're going to do on the internet. And every year it just grows incredibly because they're doing more video consumption at higher quality. It's HK, it's 4K, HD, it's 4K. And it's just going to, and the amount of consumption they're doing just grows. So the value of broadband just gets higher every single day. So I think it's a mixed bag, and generally I think competition is good. It makes products better, and generally when you're delighting the consumer, they're going to pay for it.
This is a golden age of television, I think. I mean, there's more TV being made today and more television being watched today than any point in time in history. And Netflix is spending $8 billion a year this year making shows, which is great for people who help them make shows, like you guys have a studio. There's competition for talent. But I'll add one point. In London, where on our service, it's just like X1, you can go to Netflix immediately from wherever you are, or you can search for programming, and you want to search for a show, and your menu pops up with all the options. You can watch it on Netflix, BBC, ITV, you choose. But it's actually integrated into our search function. Netflix penetration in our homes, our cable homes, is twice as high as it is in non-pay TV homes. Because people who love television just love television. And they watch more, they pay us more, they churn less, they're happier.
They want to get it on the big screen.
It's a win-win in that respect. There's a whole nother angle to it, which is, I mean, maybe some of you have Sling TV or YouTube TV, where they're not just creating great shows and you get on the channel to watch great shows. They're trying to duplicate what we do with multiple channels, but it's always a more limited offering, and it's a little cheaper, which is their opportunity here in the U.S. But I think it's been useful for us and more beneficial than not.
Well, you mentioned the golden age of television, which I agree with you. Any predictions on winners and losers in this golden age of television?
Oh, I think there's going to be more winners than losers, because I actually think TV consumption, there's going to be more ways to consume TV every year, whether it's mobile, whether it's in your car, and it's going to be increasingly global. So there's huge global opportunity for content creators. So I think content creators generally are going to be in the big win category. I think linear television per se, probably as a share of consumption, is going to continue to decline as people have other places to consume. It's still going to be important. You're going to have sports and news and
right. There's so much to consume.
Yeah. But its relative share is going to go down.
The White Walkers are coming. I mean, disruption is happening very rapidly, and you're saying the same thing, but I'm not quite as optimistic. I think if you're channel 342 on the Comcast network, for example, and you're providing great shows about pick it cooking or whatever it might be, and you're one of hundreds of services, like hundreds of magazines, if you're not innovating, if you're not finding a way to give them every possible access to your rights so they can put it on their on-demand platform, they can make it available on the phone if you have Xfinity to go, if they can make it available on the iPad, whatever it is. If you don't have those rights, number one, because you just bought them, if you don't own those rights, and you can't make your content available in all of these new ways, I think you're in trouble.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I think it's certainly true that Netflix and Hulu and Amazon have shown that people want to consume content in a different way or in an expanded way. And if you're not willing to accept that, if you're not willing to innovate around it, then your relative market share is just going to decline. And the TV business is no different than any business.
Yeah.
You know, when there's innovation.
Really changing landscape
Yeah.
going on right now. And so rather than ask you a huge question, tell us about one big change that you've seen in your part of the industry recently, and how are you dealing with that?
Recently,
Well,
Okay.
it doesn't have to be recent. One big change.
I think there's a number of things happening. If I look at our business today and 5 years ago, or 10 or 20 or 30, you pick it, it's moving very fast. I mean, I'm looking at this dog here laying on his back, really comfortable. And I will tell you that over my 30 years in this industry, we have been counted out like that many times.
Yeah.
That we're going to be flat on our back. If you're in the cable business, you're going to be out of business. And somehow we keep reinventing ourselves. And we keep reinventing ourselves for several reasons. One, the industry, as I think one of you might have said, was built by some great pioneers. His boss, my boss, people who are entrepreneurs to the bone. And the industry's always been able to kind of figure out how to evolve, whether it was from analog to digital or digital to broadband or et cetera. And secondly, we have a great network. I mean, don't underestimate that it's all about connectivity. You might not know how it gets to you, but trust me when I tell you, somebody's spending billions of dollars a year to get that to you, whether it's your email message or your, whatever it might be, your Facebook interaction, or whatever. And so we've been lucky, I think, to keep evolving. As I look out, I think one of the biggest things that's going to impact our business here, in Europe or wherever, is becoming smarter and much more agile in how we manage our data. Because you'll ask us about Facebook and all that stuff, so I won't go there, I'm sure. But at the end of the day, and I'll do that in a moment.
I'll ask you before they ask you.
Yeah, I'll do that in a moment. But I will tell you that in the next 5 years, because, back it up, everybody who was happy with X1, I'm sure if I asked you, are you happy with your customer service, you'd say, probably not. Whether it's waiting on the phone or on hold or whatever it might be. And our companies are spending a ton of money on bringing big data, machine learning, AI, robotics to that customer experience. So that you're maybe only interfacing with your company on the phone. Maybe it's actually a chat bot that's getting you 90% of the way there. Maybe you're deciding when the person comes to your house to provide the service, not waiting for them in a 4-hour block. I mean, the customer experience is incredible. And what's happening in this fourth industrial revolution is that we're all starting to use the data we own and control to make the customer experience better. And that's really exciting, especially in a business where we're really in your homes. It's not like your relationship with YouTube. Has anyone ever called YouTube? Do you know the phone number? No, but we're in your homes, right? We're knocking on your door, we're making a mess of your carpet, whatever it might be. And so making that relationship more seamless, less friction, using technology, that to me is one of many exciting things that are really happening.
Thanks.
It's interesting that you say that. The other day I was telling somebody, I've been in the cable business 25 years, and the world has always been ending.
Yeah.
And, it just gets better and better. I remember when I first started, it was the dawn of satellite, and that was going to destroy the cable
Satellite TV.
industry.
Right.
And it turned out, the opportunities that were created through digital and new technology ended up being 50 times what the competitive impact was of satellite. And I think we're going to see more of that. I think really, if you think about the video space, the place where I live in video consumption, really the fact that the internet speeds that are available to people now being capable of video consumption in a high quality is really the thing that's changing the business. And if you think about it, 30 years ago, you had print, music, photographs. They had distribution schemes that were very expensive. You had to print newspaper. You have TV networks that have to be assembled and distributed. You've got, photographs have to be on photographic paper. Music is a CD or it's vinyl. And the internet basically says, we're going to take every bit of that and turn it into ones and zeros. And then we're going to put that on a common architecture that can go anywhere and everywhere instantaneously. And so that's creating tremendous opportunity, but it's also changing that distribution paradigm. But in a lot of ways, as you said, it's better. If you think about the Comcast side of the business, broadband next to your cell phone is probably the most important technology in people's homes. It's hard to be without it.
Good news is that 80% of the time that you're on this phone, you're actually on
the Wi-Fi.
A Comcast network.
Yeah.
Because everybody's using Wi-Fi as soon as they get to the house, as soon as they get to the office. And so it's
if they were using their data plan, they'd be bankrupt.
Correct. So, and we're in Europe, we sell mobile phones. We are in the connectivity business. We want a seamless experience for you in terms of whenever you're online, whether it's your iPad or your phone or your fixed line at home. We want to be that provider because we think that's a great spot.
Well, I've been watching the congressional hearings, the Zuckerberg hearings, I guess I'm going to call it, and with great interest and moments of horror for the unintended use of that 85 million users and their data. So there have been a lot of talk about re-regulation and how to protect our privacy and just really our general well-being. What are you thinking about on that?
Wow, that's a big topic. I would say, first of all, it was inevitable. It was inevitable. This was a train that was always going to crash on some level, had to. Why? These companies have unprecedented global scale. 2 billion Facebook users, I think 5 billion searches a day on Google, 1.5 billion hours of consumption on YouTube, I think 300 hours a minute uploaded onto YouTube.
Right.
And this global scale was realized in an environment where there were no rules, virtually no rules, no regulations. So it was okay if ISIS uploaded a video on how to make bombs on YouTube. That was okay for a long time. It was okay if Google had 90% market share in Europe and was only putting their stuff on the first page, where nobody ever goes beyond anyway. It was okay for a while. It was okay that Facebook was giving 80 million customer accounts to people in Cambridge Analytica to do, until it wasn't. And it never really was. And I'll tell you, it's a bit of I think they're shaken. It would have been better if they were more preemptive, if they had saw this coming, the way some of us did, and started self-regulating. But they didn't, and that's okay because I understand that urge for growth, the desire to be bigger and to be better, and I think to do it in their minds with a sort of a social component to it. They always feel they're doing good, but in reality, when it's all of humanity, there are bad actors in humanity. It's just inevitable. It can't all be good. And now they're being regulated, right? I mean, I watched a bit of that, and I think
So it's not assured, but there's discussion of it.
regulation for it is
right.
assured. It is assured. I will tell you, it's happening in Europe, starting next month in Europe.
That's right.
There will be something called GDPR, which is all of us in the industry in Europe have to be able to do several things on May 25th. If you call us and want your data back, if you call us and want your data erased, if you want to know what's happening to your data, what we're doing with it, if you want to port it over to somebody else's platform, we have to do that within 30 days. That doesn't exist in America. It may never, but it should. And the Europeans have a much stronger view of privacy, of balance, I think. And so they said, enough's enough. They just fined Google 2.5 billion euros because of their dominance in the search business. So I think it was somewhat inevitable, and maybe they'll self-regulate. Maybe Congress will come up with something similar to what the Europeans are doing. But they're shaken. Last story, I'm on the YouTube advisory board, and it's been very interesting to watch them manage through this in terms of trying to find the line of what is and what isn't acceptable. And how do you decide whether some earnest person who uploads something does or doesn't cross the line? It's a very difficult issue when 300 hours a minute are being uploaded. How do you figure that out? And,
Well, it has to be automatic.
yeah, well, there's algorithms, and there's more and more people. It's becoming partially people-driven, but they understand the problem. They know they can't have violent extremism and terrorism and all sorts of harmful things, and they have to find a way to bring it in. And it's been admirable to me actually to watch them do that and to watch them go through some tragic events that you're all aware of. So I think ultimately they'll figure it out. I'm not sure they're going to. There's $3.5 trillion of market cap in those 5 biggest companies. It's down a little bit. I wouldn't sell your stock. I think it's going to be okay. But it's been a bit of a comeuppance.
Yeah, I think they're gonna find their way through this. They'll do some version of finding Jesus, expressing contrition, making some changes. I don't know if there's ever going to be material legislation here in the U.S. Be interesting to see if that happens.
Yeah.
But I think there's so much value that customers derive out of those platforms, and I think they're just going to keep going. They will make some changes. They have to, really. It is amazing to me to see how they've gone from the companies that everybody loves to the companies that many, many people fear, really around this at a consumer level. And they're going to have to fix that, but I'm sure they will fix it, and they're going to invest a lot of money, I think, in doing it. But fundamentally, this genie is not getting put back in the bottle in terms of data and what you do online and somehow you owning that. I'm a little more pessimistic that's ever going to really be.
Well, I'll tell you, I'll give you
contained.
some cause for optimism. In Europe, Facebook is already complying with what I just said. So they have already put in place the tools, and so has Google, the tools that the European government has required of them. And if you don't comply, they have the right to fine you 4% of global revenues. Now, maybe some people would say, hey, you're better off not complying, because if you're growing 20% a year, who cares? It's a cost of doing business. But I don't know, there were some pretty angry politicians on those 2 days of hearings, pretty angry, and I don't know how they walk back from that. You sit there, you really come down on this, this guy, and then you just say, well, but we're not going to do anything. So I think something will happen. We'll see. Maybe they'll self-regulate.
Yeah.
That could be.
No, I think for sure there's going to be some of that.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for May 25th. That's when the EU legislation goes into effect, and that may be the template for things that we do here. So Mike's all over that. I know you're already ready for it. Good. So you mentioned the fourth industrial revolution. Let's talk about that, because huge technology changes. It's Internet of Things. Whoever thought that this was going to be something that I wear as jewelry and it matches my outfit, right? My watch, what new technology do you guys see coming in your space?
I'll let you start this time.
Oh, sure. Well, I think you're just going to see a continuation of this digital revolution and internet revolution. Obviously, the internet is going to be in every object you own. It's all going to be communicating. Your usage is going to be tracked. Your profiles are going to be in every device that you have. I think in terms of the television business, I think a couple technologies that we see that will be changing, aside from mobility, is self-driving cars. That actually may provide a lot of additional time for people to watch television. And I think that innovations in display technologies is going to make video really almost everywhere. Just everywhere you're going to be, there's going to be video. And people love video, and people love television, and so I think we may see TV consumption, even though there's competition from social media and competition from gaming. We may actually see video consumption, modestly rise over time. And then I think in terms of how customers interact, you talked about the X1 box. I think that's going to go to an even higher level, utilizing AI and other technologies where you're really going to walk in the door and you're going to communicate with your house like a human being. And your house is going to know everything you like, and you're just going to walk in and you're going to tell your house whatever you want done. Lights on, make it hotter, make it cooler. Instead of having to go through a guide in terms of TV, you'll just talk to your TV and say, I want to watch TV, and what do you recommend? And you're going to have natural language communication, I think, with these home automation systems, and that's going to change how you consume a lot of media, and whoever is controlling a lot of those algorithms are really going to change your consumption.
Totally agree. I think I read somewhere that we will reach 50% penetration of devices like Alexa or Google Home faster than we reached 50% penetration of smartphones, pardon me, and televisions. There are 44 million this year, I think, alone being sold. That's up 60%. So you'll all have one. And here's the good news. And again, I'm really promoting Comcast here. They should be. And we're doing the same thing. I saw some demos today in the office where the voice remote that I'm sure you're all using, if you don't have a voice remote for Comcast, get one.
Get one.
But that voice remote will talk to Alexa someday. Doesn't yet, but it will. And you'll say, Alexa, order me, more Coca-Cola for the house, whatever. And then Alexa, you'll say, Alexa, turn on Comcast. It's all going to be an integrated platform at some point. So it won't be, multiple devices and everybody, not sure who listened to me this time. Was it Google that listened to me? Or, imagine walking in and not sure which one you're talking to. I think it's all going to be integrated, and that's also because, it's a huge opportunity, the smart home, if you will. The other thing that we're excited about, I mentioned a little bit, but I think artificial intelligence, and it can mean a lot of different things. For example, a very simple application of artificial intelligence for us is if you call our call center, the computer will rapidly look through what you do, what you watch, who you are, and if you're a football fan, or let's say American football fan or soccer fan in the UK, we know we're not sending you to Jana because she doesn't like that. But Matt is a super expert at the call center on soccer, so the call's going to him. Seems simple, but if you can't process that instantaneously, using good data, not violating anybody's privacy, just using good data, that's going to make that customer interaction 100 times better. These things are coming very, very quickly, and
there's going to be a big fight over who's going to be the OS for your house.
Yeah.
Who's going to be the OS? Who's going to be your virtual butler? Is that going to be a Google device, an Amazon device?
I think life's getting really cool. I've never been more excited about this ecosystem. It's really great stuff, and if you're not using it, start using it. It's really, it's an exciting time.
It's hard to imagine going back from the voice remote.
It really is. It really is. And I never thought about the self-driving cars being an opportunity to watch more television. That's great. A growth experience for the industry. That's great. So I'd like to change a little bit here and start talk more about the regulation. And this is going on in both the US and in Europe, where regulators are really struggling with whether or not or how to regulate the internet. So last year in the US, the FCC rescinded some rules that were put in previously around a kind of regulation known as Title II, which was actually part of the Communications Act of 1936 to regulate radio. So not sure how applicable that is. But I'm interested in your views or what impact you think it's net neutrality.
I think it's a terrible term, to be honest with you, because it's so provocative. It implies that if it's not neutral, it's somehow imbalanced, unfair, discriminatory. Of course it's not. I think there's several myths around net neutrality, and you're going to understand quickly where I am on it. The first myth is somehow companies like ours are discriminating against you or certain websites. That if you're going to this website and we don't have a deal with that guy, he's going to get blocked or slowed down or throttled. But we're going to speed up your experience to that website or maybe not block them. The idea that somehow we can actually if you're paying for 25 megabit service, or in our case, everybody's got about 100 or more megabits, we better deliver that to you, and you better be able to get it from anywhere you go, anywhere you travel. And if we don't do it, then you're going to subscribe to somebody else. So the idea that ISPs, as we're generally called sometimes, are somehow favoring or discriminating against certain websites, that doesn't happen. The second myth, I think, is that in the future, it's going to be, and this is what the Silicon Valley guys are quite concerned about, that startups won't thrive if somebody's getting preference, if there's a fast lane. Not so much a slow lane, but if somebody pays me for a super fast lane, well, then they're going to get some priority over the internet or delivery. I'll tell you something. If my kids are in a driverless car, because I don't think I'm going to own one, I might. I hope they have priority. I hope that the massive amounts of communication occurring in those driverless cars isn't getting messed up because somebody's, watching Netflix at the bus stop. There have to be fast lanes in the internet. It's not about slowing everybody else down. It's about carving for help. If somebody's doing surgery in Kentucky and they need all the information in LA, that has to be a real-time experience. No latency, no nothing. So the idea that the internet will constantly be, available to everyone has to be there. But you need to create some kind of preferred or specialized services. The Europeans get this. They're fine with specialized services. They understand that there are going to be applications that require unique and maybe better, faster connectivity and low latency. But for the most part, it has to be a best effort for everybody else. Everybody else has to get the same experience. So I think the net neutrality rules that were rolled back, it was the right thing to do. It was going to stifle innovation and stifle investment, because none of this happens if we don't put $5 billion a year just in we're small relatively. We're putting $5 billion a year into networks, R&D, products, capacity, broadband. If it becomes an unlevel playing field, I think, and people stop investing, then none of this happens. So there has to be a balance, and I think that's why the Europeans have always had a balanced view of net neutrality. And I think while we've come 180 degrees with this FCC, I think we're closer to where it should be. It's a personal view.
What about legislation? Do you think this should go to Congress? Because
I don't know why. The first one didn't, right? When the prior administration decided to regulate ISPs and telecom companies and cable companies with 1930 regulation, it didn't show, but it might. I'm not so sure it would be a problem if it did, but I don't know that it needs to.
I think it's really it's a solution in search of a problem. There really hasn't been bad actors or bad action that's happened out there. Meanwhile, as you said, billions and billions of dollars got invested in the architecture, and the product offerings that have come to consumers are much better today than they were 10 years ago. And the Title II ruling, was so ill-suited for any kind of evil that they were trying to address. And I also agree with you, the phrase net neutrality, it's like diamonds are forever. They came up with this great tagline, and it implies that you can't oppose it, because who would be opposed to neutrality?
Right, of course.
But in fact, I think that if you look at it historically, a large amount of government regulation isn't really good for the consumer. If you think when the government regulated telephones and they regulated trucking and they regulated airlines, and as soon as the industries got deregulated, prices went down 50 to 90%, and investment in those industries increase. And so I think if you get into a mode where you're accepting broad-based regulation on this industry sector, where you've got no really demonstrated harm or bad action, it's really just going to chill innovation and stop a lot of these wonderful things that are happening. And Mike's right, there is going to be different versions of the internet. I have in New York, I have a 1 gigabit service. I pay a little more for it. I love it. And I think you're going to see versions of that, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with having different priced packages for different qualities of service.
So what I'm hearing you both say is that we're all for an open internet.
Yeah.
What we're not for is excessive intervention or regulation, right?
Correct.
Is that-
Yeah.
I'll tell you one of the other
And
things.
we got net neutrality. Yeah.
mean-
We're all for that. We're
Yeah.
just not for excessive regulation.
Right.
Okay, great. Cord cutting, Matt.
Yes.
There's kind of a trend on that, and many programmers have gone direct to consumer. What's NBCU's strategy for dealing with these over-the-top developments?
So at the same time that there's been some cord-cutting behavior or a reduction in the number of subscribers.
I should have asked you first. Is there cord cutting?
Well,
No,
that's what I'm going to get to. So
Okay.
you've seen a shift really in customer preferences, because at the same time that you've seen some of this behavior with respect to traditional distributors, you've also had a number of new market entrants that have come into the marketplace, like YouTube, like Hulu, like Sony. And so what you're seeing is a changing mix, but you're really not seeing in total a dramatic change in the number of video subscribers. So that may change over time. And in terms of what we have to do, if you just look at NBC, it really goes back to what I said earlier. We're going to have products that customers want at the end of the day. And we're going to have a product set that has both the availability and the windows and the content that people want to watch. And we have to do that every day. When it was a linear world, it was very easy. You had a certain number of shows you had to produce, and you tried to make the best ones possible. In this environment, it's much more complicated. You have to think about where it's available, and you have to think about the windows and whether you're satisfying customers' desires for back seasons and things like that.
Well,
How about on your side of the
I think it's a
of
little
the
easier
aisle?
where we are for a couple of reasons. One of the challenges in the U.S., of course, is that the cable bill is big. And it's big for a lot of reasons, and it's not necessarily their fault or our fault as such. It's big because $45 a month of your cable bill is going to program suppliers. And that's gone up pretty rapidly. So it's not just your cable company raising your bills because they kind of want to charge you more. It's your cable company raising your bills because someone like ESPN, for example, is taking a huge chunk of that bill, whether you watch it or not. So there is a fundamental problem in the structure of the industry that's evolved over decades that has to be addressed and is being addressed as programmers go direct to consumer and as these new startup skinny bundles start to evolve, there's pressure and tension. So that's a different, in Europe, we don't have that issue quite as much. For starters, the cable bill is a third of the US cable bill because we're not paying $45 a month, we're paying $8 a month to program suppliers. And then secondly, it's just, the OTT guys themselves aren't quite as distributed or well penetrated, so it's not quite as competitive there. But it's happening. You know, we'll lose 0.5% of our subs every year. It's getting better, and it's getting better because we're investing a ton more in the experience. If we don't provide X1-like products and services, if we're not making your video available on your phone and on every device that you've already paid for, if we're not giving you a gigabit speed broadband service at some point, well, then we should lose your service. You should go to somebody else. And because we're investing a ton of money in that, we're actually not losing that many customers. I think we're 30% better last year than we were the year before, and almost twice as good last year as 2 years ago. So we're losing fewer video subs. I think Comcast was too for a while after X1 really exploded. When you're losing 0.5%, it's not the end of the world.
Exactly. And this is a pretty sophisticated audience at Voices of Experience, and I think they'd like to hear a little more from you, Mike, about the differences in the industry between Europe and U.S.
Okay, well, I mentioned one.
Right. The bill.
Europeans have a smoking hot deal, I'll tell you. For 35 euros, you can get hundreds of channels, 100 megabit, minimum 100 megabit broadband speed, voice services, and then why don't we throw a couple mobile phones in there for you too. It's just a very competitive market. I'm not saying the U.S. isn't competitive, it's a little less competitive, and cable is really strong in this market. We're strong, but we have stronger competitors in the telco space and a lot of resellers. Not to get too detailed, but in Europe, if you just want to start a business, you can come to a phone company and say, I want to rent your network, basically, and I can start selling broadband, which creates a lot of broadband brands and services, so much more competitive, and a better deal for consumers, which means lower churn, fewer disconnects every year, and we think steady growth. I'd say the TV business is different, whereas in the U.S., naturally we saw a pretty consistent decline in the number of people watching and spending time with the networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox. I don't know what it is today, 30, 40%, or whatever the aggregate number is. In Europe, people are still spending 80% of their time watching those free-to-air broadcast networks because they're local. And in Europe, where you have different languages, different cultures, different histories, they're not interested in, a pan-European product. They kind of want their stuff. So it's more fragmented, more localized.
Over the air is much stronger.
Much stronger, which is good for us because we carry those networks and we want customers to lean back from time to time and enjoy their content. So I think it's the other thing I'd add, just one more thing, which is we're rapidly getting into the mobile business. It's happening here too. Comcast recently launched a mobile product. We've been in it for years. And we're starting to buy mobile companies. We're starting to partner with mobile companies in a very deep way. And we anticipate down the road either being the national champion with fixed and mobile services, or perhaps enabling one by partnering with one. But it's rapidly becoming what we call a quad play market, where 25, 30% of customers are getting everything from one person: their phone, their video, their broadband, and their mobile services from one provider. And that hasn't happened here really at all yet, in terms of any scale, but it's likely to happen over time.
I think it will.
Yeah.
That's the way customers want to buy.
And more highly regulated also.
Yeah, I think the regulators there are pretty balanced. I would say you don't have the wild fluctuations that you have here. In 30 years, I've seen a lot of it, and we just witnessed it. Net neutrality, one day, 18 months later, gone. It doesn't happen that way in Europe. You get getting all those countries to agree on something in Brussels is not easy. It doesn't happen quickly.
Okay, good. So Matt, if you could talk a bit about how NBCU has dealt with social media and the advertising front.
Social.
Yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead.
Well,
You're on it.
social media is obviously very important to our customers, and we use it in a lot of different ways. We use it promotionally for a lot of our businesses, be it the TV networks, the theme parks, the film studio, and the TV studio. Additionally, we're starting to create content for social media platforms. We've got the 2 best performing shows on Snapchat right now, and it's really amazing to see how much people use those channels, use those video channels now. YouTube is a huge part of our consumption for a lot of the clips we create around late night content and news content. So I think that these social media companies are going to be an increasingly important platform for video consumption. I think that on an economic basis, though, it's hard to see. They don't really have a business model where you would see very expensive, high-quality, scripted programming going there, because there just isn't a revenue potential. Maybe that'll change in the future. But I don't see them being an outlet unless they come up with a different business model or change their business model in some way. But they're huge and going to be huger.
And I have to say, my staff insisted that I say something to you about This Is Us. And what a wonderful,
the huge hit.
Great show, right? Right, congratulations on that. Yeah. Mike, how about targeting the targeted advertising opportunities that are going on in Europe?
Yeah, but that's a good question, and I will tell you that as good as Facebook is in monetizing customer interactions, or YouTube is in monetizing billions of hours of video that you watch, at least I know Comcast has a different setup here in the US, we're making no money today. Meaning that we might have tens of billions of hours of your viewership information. We know what channels you were on. We know how long you were on them for. We don't know which person in the house was necessarily watching them. We know that wherever you're clicking on your internet through our broadband network, we have all those DNS clicks, billions of them a day. And today we make zero revenue. Partially because we're panicked, right? We're a little frightened about what's being discussed now, and we don't yet have that customer opt-in authority to start doing those things. So we're really, I would say, late to the game, but that also is creating a lot of opportunity for us. So in our view, and you're much more knowledgeable about this than I am, but I think in 5-10 years, you're going to go from, 12, 14, 15 minutes of advertising on a broadcast network to probably half that or less, because a lot of the advertising dollars are being wasted. If Brad has no interest in a truck, why am I sending him that ad? Let's send him an ad on Ferrari or whatever. I don't know what you're driving today, Brad, but the point is, it's been proven. If we can get the data we have about who you are, what you're watching, and we can ensure that the ads go to the right viewers, everybody wins. The advertiser wins, the customer wins, and actually we win. And we're starting to do that very, very slowly in targeted advertising context by very carefully with consumer support, figuring out how we can make that a better experience for advertisers principally, and for the networks that we're working with. But it's very early days, and we have a lot to learn, but a lot of opportunity.
I think Mike's right. A cable company and a network to some degree has a ton of data and information, but I think what stopped it being monetized is, well, what do you do with it? So Facebook uses their data to target advertising. In the TV business, there really hasn't been a capability to target advertising. And I do think that that's changing. And you're absolutely right. I think in the future, you're going to see fewer ads that are worth way more. That feels to me the direction that it's going to go. And it's going to be worth way more because we're going to be using these kind of dynamic and targeting tools that are used so successfully on the internet today are going to find their way into the television business. And as you said, I think it'll be better for customers. There'll be less ads that you will see and more ads that you will see that will be relevant to you.
There were two reasons, and they don't publish this, I don't think, but I believe it's true. I'm sure someone can get the research. The thing people love about Netflix, top one or two things, is no advertising. The thing you love about your DVR, I'm sure you'll, even though he's in that business, you'll say it in front of him, is you can skip the ads. I mean, how many people have a DVR and how many people skip their ads on the DVR? Everybody. And so that's real. And it's a real, it doesn't mean that people who are sell advertising aren't making a lot of money. They are, and it hasn't really, strangely, it hasn't impacted the overall pie because there's economic growth and people want to reach big audiences. But I think the advertising model for everybody is changing over the next 10 years and probably maybe more quickly than it has in the last 10 years.
You had an ad model that was developed in a technology where they were not skippable. So you had no way to avoid.
Right.
So when you have ways to avoid watching ads, whether by watching Netflix or by using your DVR, the ad model is going to have to change, and it will change. I don't think commercials in television are going to go away. Maybe they will, but I think there's going to be an opportunity there. It'll be better. And I think innovation here is actually going to be, and competition is actually going to be good for the product.
Targeted, right, right. Thanks, guys. So one of the things we do at the Cable Center, and Brent talked about it a bit, is we go out with cable executives and talk to students. And one of the things the students always want to know is about, how did you get here? What was your personal journey? And I know we have some students in the audience, so listen up, because I'm about to ask these two very successful gentlemen how'd they get here? How'd they get in the chair?
You want me to go? Well, mine is going to be the most disappointing answer because...
This is your opportunity to pitch DU.
Yes, I know. So the reality in my life is I haven't really applied for a job since I was probably 25. And jobs have basically come to me really, in my perception, sort of out of the blue. And usually based on something that I had done some years before. I would do a piece of work for somebody. I would used to be a lawyer. I would successfully prosecute a case, or something would happen that somebody noticed, and then 3 years later, I would get a phone call. And that happened when I first came to TCI. It happened when I then moved over to the Yankees. My experience with the Yankees in meeting Brian and Steve and doing the deal with them, 18 months later when they bought TCI, the old TCI, I ended up getting that job. And you also see these job opportunities, they're not really visible when you do that thing that actually puts you in the right position at the right time. So really what I glean from that is you really have to do the best job you can and care about what you do and really just try to impress the people you're working for and really put out a good product, because every day you're putting down little seeds and you never know which one of those is going to turn into a fantastic opportunity 6 months or 6 years down the road. Now, I don't know if I would advise people to follow the kind of spore-like nature of my career. So you may want to have more,
perhaps more
precision,
strategic direction.
More strategic direction. It's worked out okay for me. But I do think fundamentally you're really not going to succeed in life unless you're doing great work as often as you can, every day, and it may feel like it's thankless at the moment, but you never know when you're going to have an interaction with somebody and it's going to pay off big dividends later.
So I
Great.
was born and raised in California, one of 8 kids, which explains a lot about me. I think my ability to manage, relationships, complexity, chaos. I can eat dinner in a commercial break, things like that. And I look back on my career and I say, I think really how I managed through those 18 years before I left home in that family environment had a lot to do with who I am. I went back east for 10 years. I went to a small liberal arts college. I was the only one in my family to leave California, and I haven't been back. But I went to the East Coast, studied in a small liberal arts college, went to business school in New York, Columbia, and got involved in the finance
A
business.
small little school, Columbia.
Well, the college I went to was small.
Okay.
Actually, where our governor and our senator went. But anyhow, I got involved in finance after, and I stayed on the East Coast and worked in New York City, and I started working with cable companies and media companies, as a grunt, as a young executive. And I came out to Colorado. I remember my first meeting with Bob Magnus, who many of you might have heard of, and founded TCI, and John Malone. And we were doing some small work with them. I can't remember what it was. And I kind of got the bug. This industry is full of incredible people, risk takers, pioneers, good people, authentic people. And at the time, one of the companies I was working for was selling their business to John Malone and decided that they were going to they had a simple idea. Maybe people in Europe want to watch MTV and CNN. Maybe they would like this stuff we were watching in the 80s. Why don't we go over there and figure out if people outside of America care about this stuff? And lo and behold, they actually did. And there was some small-scale cable stuff happening all over the world. And so I took a 70% pay cut, and I drove out here, and I was thinking to myself, there are the mountains, and I know on the other side of those mountains is California. So if this doesn't work out, I'm just going to keep driving. I just keep going, I get home, figure it all out, it'll all be good. And 28 years later, here I am. I was the 5th employee in the company. I think today, if you add it up, it's 45, 50,000 people. And it was not a straight line for us. We were wildcatters in a way, and we didn't have a lot of capital at first, but we had ambition, and we knew there was something incredible about this industry, these networks, this consumption pattern. It was going to grow, and if we could figure out how to do it, it would be great. We had a really good run. I was traveling all over the world, building all of our relationships in Asia, Latin America, and Europe. And we had a nice run up through the 90s, and then the internet bubble hit. And I will tell you, many of you will remember that. There might be some students who don't know what that is. But let me tell you, it was a tough moment. Our company in particular was reliant on capital. And when the internet bubble crashed or blew up, there was no more money. The spigot was turned off. So our company was in trouble. And we went from high flyers to pretty much flat on our face. And, John Malone likes to say, you don't really know what you're capable of till you're lower than whale shit. And it was a rough moment for all of us. But I will tell you, that moment for me was the turning point in my career, because it was kind of like Designated Survivor. I was the last man standing. Other people left or got fired, and I was young and 30-something, and boom, I was CEO after several years of very complex deals that only people who have a liberty on their business card and John Malone in their ambit, whatever, figure out or understand. Complex things that put the company back together, righted the ship, and then my job was to reinvigorate, rebuild, give employees confidence that we can do this. It was a tough moment, but we can turn this around and do it. And in the last 13 years, we've built an incredible business, built it back up and made it even bigger and more exciting. And that, I like to say, I'm not going to hire someone who doesn't have a little bit of scar tissue. Because if you haven't seen, into the abyss, if you haven't been through that, you might not know what failure feels like. And I don't want to be around for your first failure. I'd rather be around when you've already had that experience. And I think it's important for people, especially important for young people, to realize it's okay to fail. And by the way, having some failure in your resume, talk it up. How'd you respond? What did you do? How'd you grow from that? What did it mean to you? I think it's really a valuable lesson, and has been for me. So I really only had 2 jobs in my career. Wow. And I'd tell you something, the 3 things that probably worked best for me, if I look back on the decisions made, was one, You've got to hire great people. I think you said that too. You really have to surround yourself with really good people, and you have to like them, and they have to like you. It has to be a culture that is fun to work in. People like each other, work well together. That's really critical. I think you also, have to. I think you might have mentioned this too, Matt. Is you got to work hard. I look at my two kids. They're not here. One's in college, one's in high school, and they're both super bright. One's just a grinder. I mean, she works hard. She's maybe not even as smart as her sister, but she just works hard. She just grinds it, and takes advice and wants. The other one's probably smarter, but she doesn't listen quite as much, or not maybe, and so she'll have a different path. But I think if you're a grinder, if you care about the quality of what you're delivering, if you really want to do well, and you said this, if you want to, and not impress people, but it will have the effect of impressing people, but just do your best, always. Care about the end product. And then the last thing I would say is have balance. I think I've tried in my life to not be all about work, to have things I love to do, whatever they might be, hobbies or sports or, things that your family, most importantly, ground yourself. Because I can tell you this, when you're on your deathbed, you won't be thinking about your job. As much as I've loved my career, I won't be thinking about my career. I really won't. I'll be thinking about other goals, other things, other targets I set, other achievements in my personal life, relationships, kids. That's what you'll care about. So you have to nurture that part of your career. You can't just be all about business.
It's interesting when you talk about hiring great people. I would say what I've seen is probably the number one management error is that people will be fearful of hiring top talent because they feel as though it might make them superfluous or show them up. And so they will tend not to look or cultivate the best talent because they want to be the most important person. But what I've found is you're just making your life harder, and you really should strive to put yourself in a position where if you didn't show up, nothing would happen.
Such a good lesson. I remember last story. I remember in the day when we were just 5 people, and I was doing all the work. I was the analyst, the associate, the business development guy, running numbers, doing spreadsheets, putting presentations together, flying. It was a one-man show in the area I was focused on, and that was a big moment for me when we had the resources, we could get a bigger office, we could hire good people. It was an aha moment, man. You can absolutely scale yourself by hiring incredibly talented people to do the work. Let go, let smart people come to you with those ideas, do the great work,
Right.
and that's an important lesson, I think.
Exactly. And what you said, Matt, about you never know when you're doing something what that's going to lead to. The gentleman who gave me my first start in the cable industry is here tonight. And Pete Gachos, I hope he's still here. And Pete, because I'm giving him a shout out, Pete.
Right there.
Look, I turned out okay. and Pete pulled me down off a referee stand at a volleyball match. And that's how I got in and said, hey, I got a job that you might be interested in. So you never know when it's going to happen. So let's take a few questions, guys. You up for it?
Fine.
Sure.
Okay. We have some folks with mics, and raise your hand, and we'd love to hear from you. Right here, sir.
Episodic TV show. It's now they've just shot the second series, second season, and so my question is, their goal with the YouTube, it's on YouTube, and their goal is to get off YouTube, to have NBC pick them up, Matt. I'll give you my card later. But is that the right goal? I mean, if you were, they're like at 20,000 subscribers on YouTube. It's growing. They've got some monetization of that. They've got an audience, a worldwide audience. Would that be the goal, to
What
be
kind
picked
of
up?
content is it?
It's well, I would call it a Friends for Lesbians. It's a comedy show, gay comedy show.
I see. Like a scripted show? Or it's
It's a scripted show.
I see. Well, I think that's really not the part of the distribution I'm in. That's really the part of the chain where you're in that creative community. But what I would say is, I think it's going to be really hard unless YouTube has a different business model. I think it's going to be really hard for people to make a lot of money on YouTube, even if they have, massive usage. So, but believe me, those kind of folks can get fed into the traditional system. And it may be something on Netflix. It doesn't mean it has to be on a network. There's so many opportunities for content creators, but you really have to get yourself in a position probably where you're getting paid to put a show on television in some form or fashion.
So disappointed in you, Mark, because you're my friend and you're my insurance broker. I thought you were here to listen to me, and all along, your only motivation is to connect your daughter.
Yeah.
Can't believe it. Just can't believe it.
For those of you who are behind the lectern here, I think we have a question over here. Sorry, Pete, I couldn't see you behind the lectern.
I know, I'm petite.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, Cecilia Ortega-Lagos. I'm currently in the Executive MBA program here at University of Denver. And I have a question around what do we see moving forward in terms of our advancement? We talked a lot about European advancement. I happen to work for a company where GDPR, these types of advancements where Alexa is talking to robotics. We're actually doing that right now in Nice. We'll be presenting a lot of that type of technology here in May. What I have seen and learned is that we're really behind. If you really look at our telecommunications and where we are in our customer experience versus IoE and IoT, we're somewhat behind. So you see this as being because of the regulatory roadblocks that we have here in the US versus that we have all over in the US. If you look at Huawei, you look at what just happened a couple weeks ago with Huawei being completely disbanded from the US. We've got 5G coming. All of our customer service providers are here in the US, like your AT&Ts, your original RBox, right? They seem to be having a wall because right now everyone else is growing, especially in 5G, and we're not growing that way. Everywhere you go in the world, you can take your phone and you don't even have cash. And here we are, and we're now using Venmo. But this is something that has been utilized all over the world for over, 2 years, 3 years. So how do you guys see that, and where are you placing your industries right now so that you're moving forward into that digital transformation that we're not quite seeing here in the U.S.?
Well, there's a lot in that question right there.
I know, I apologize.
I should have recorded it, but it was a lot of stuff. I'll hit on a couple things, and then you can, fill in whatever you think makes sense. But let me talk about 5G for a minute. 5G is essentially the next generation of a mobile phone, and it's going to do really just one thing better than this phone does. It's going to be faster. You're going to have access to more data. It's going to be quicker, less latency, and you're, instead of a 5 megabit type speed service, it might be 50. It might be just as fast as your stuff at home, and that's good. That's because 4G, this phone's better than the one you had last time, and the one you had last time was better than the one you had before that. It's a natural evolutionary step. 5G is not revolutionary. It's just the same thing we've been doing for 20 years. It's going to get a little faster, a little better. The problem with 5G is it takes a lot of money. And if you drive around Denver, if you were on Google Maps and you could have a little red dot where all the cell towers were in Denver, take your red pen out and draw about 1,000 more, because you need massively dense networks to provide that kind of speed and service. That takes a lot of money. You also need spectrum, new, different spectrum than we have today. Then you need someone to come up with a chip, and then you need Apple to build a new phone, and there's a lot of steps along the way. Nobody's doing it. I'm in Europe, it's a pipe dream. You want to know why it's a pipe dream in Europe? Because we have 4 mobile operators in this country. There are 120 different mobile operators in Europe. There are more mobile operators in Luxembourg than there are in China. So Europe has a whole series of problems in terms of way too competitive. Everybody wants more for less. The economic model isn't there yet, And it'll get right, but the economic model isn't there yet for $1 trillion of investment into 5G. It's going to happen, but it's going to take time. And I think the other point I'd make is that it's funny because in Europe, they ask the exact opposite question. They say, how come we can't build a Google? Why haven't we built a Facebook? Why didn't we come up with Amazon? What the heck is wrong with Europe that we don't have any digital champions? None, not even one. China's got some, because China's all about China, and they ring-fence China, and they do their own thing, and they, and they're bad actors. Let's be clear. They steal IP. They definitely are doing all the things that they're being accused of, and everybody agrees to that. Whether this is the right way to deal with it, no longer conversation. But in Europe, they worry about the opposite. They say, how come Europeans can't develop the next great technology, the cool investment, the cool application? So I think the U.S., if that's what you're focused on, is doing pretty well. And there will be, investment will follow, thankfully, because things like net neutrality have been rolled back a bit. Because if we don't spend trillions of dollars, and that's what it'll end up being, if we don't, if Comcast doesn't, if AT&T doesn't, none of it happens. People think 5G is a right. I deserve it. It should just happen to me. Well, it doesn't work that way. Someone has to go out and spend hundreds of billions of dollars. So be patient. It's all coming. That would be my 2 cents.
Thanks, Mike.
How about one more question?
Back here in the back. You, yes. Wait for a mic, please. Because we'd all love to hear your question.
Thank you for being here. I'm Courtney. I'm a second-year law student at CU. And I'm curious about, I really pretty emphatically agree with both of you when it comes to net neutrality. And I'm curious, where I get tripped up in the conversation about it is when it comes to rural and tribal America. And I'm curious, obviously it's important, but I'm curious how it's important to content distribution and whether it matters that we get broadband on board, or if mobile is enough, or if it's okay that we're still on satellite in that area. Are we getting access to the same content, and how important is that, or if that's really more of an issue for a different industry?
I don't know that that's really net neutrality specifically. It is an issue.
Right.
Frankly, I have a house in Steamboat, and there's no internet service there. So I would love that. If I could get that for my house. The fact of the matter is it's expensive. You have rural areas where there's not a lot of population density, and trying to run fiber, underground fiber to serve these communities is just very, very costly. So that isn't really a regulatory issue. It's really more of it's more who's going to pay the freight. Is that the taxpayer going to pay the freight? Because there just isn't an economic reason. It's not economical to serve those areas. And now you mentioned wireless, and you were talking about 5G. That is really the hope for that 5G technology will really fill in all of those blanks very effectively. But as you aptly stated, the costs of 5G are just staggering, and there's going to have to be an economic behind that somehow, some way. And there's so much price competition among wireless providers. I don't know what it's like in Europe, but it's making it hard to see where the pot of gold is for 5G.
Yeah. I'll give you, it is not only expensive, but it is essential. I'll give you a slightly different view on it, because if we can't bring those populations into the digital world, if we can't bridge that gap, that divide, it's tragic. When you think about all the great stuff we've talked about here today, the pace at which it's going to happen, the incredible experiences we're going to have, and there are people left behind, that's a problem. It is expensive, and I think the answer will be public-private partnership, maybe more public than private. I know in this state, Governor Hickenlooper did sign into law a program that will see over 5 years about $150 million dedicated to rural areas where there will be infrastructure built, and that's a huge advantage. Across America, there are 25 million people, I think, or maybe it's even 25 million homes, but let's say it's people, where they are not in the digital world. And that also can't be. And by the way, it's the same thing in every country. Every region of the world is struggling with the same question. And I think the better it gets here for us in Denver, the bigger the problem in the rural areas. Because it's not just, well, my cell phone works like this and yours kind of works, or you don't have a smartphone and I have a smartphone. That's a marginal distinction. But if you're getting a gigabit to your house, with these incredible experiences and they're not getting anything and they're stuck with a cell phone that everybody's using to do homework in the house or something, that's not acceptable. So I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen with federal support and subsidy. That's what I think, because there isn't a business model. But with partnerships with commercial organizations who can facilitate, connect, then you might have a better outcome. But I think it's a really important point.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. This two voices of experience, right?